Welcome back, my fellow pickleballers. Lloyd here from the Pickleball store, and today we're taking a look at a paddle or a couple of paddles we get a lot of questions about here in the store. It's Joola. Today we're going to take a look at the Gen 2 Joola paddles, specifically Ben John's paddles. So in front of me here we've got the 16mm Perseus, and we've also got the Hyperion C2, which was quite new to the UK. It's probably been around for about 2 or 3 months here in the UK, which is interesting because the Gen 3's just come out, but the C2 shape has recently joined the UK market. We had it in store about a month, maybe a month and a half ago. It's been doing very, very well. And there's a reason behind it, but we'll cover both paddles individually and then we'll take a look at them collectively. Just to caveat this, we are going to be talking about Gen 2 paddles until the team have actually been able to test the Gen 3 paddles which have been launched. For those of you that are looking at Gen 3 paddles potentially to buy, just be aware these currently at the time of recording are not approved to be used in any form of competition across America, specifically America. I think you'll be able to get away with using them in competitions around Europe because the rules are not as strict yet. However, the Gen 3 paddles, you may have seen if you follow the paddle world, these are not approved to be used in the MLP, the PPA or any USA pickleball approved tournaments across the US. So if you're trying to abide by the rules of the USAPA, most tournaments are refraining from using the Gen 3 paddles because they are far too powerful. I am told many different reasons, but these paddles are very, very powerful. I'm sure it'll all be sorted out soon, but for the time being, we're going to take a look at the Gen 2s. So to kick off our Ben John specific Gen 2 Joola paddles, we're going to take a look at his paddle of choice for many, many months, maybe even over a year, which is the Joola Perseus 16mm. 16mm being the thickness of the core, and the Perseus being their new shape, which is more your kind of traditional paddle shape as opposed to his old style Hyperion, which we've got the newer Hyperion shape here. So let's kick off today's review around the Joola Perseus Gen 2. So for those of you interested in a Joola paddle, the Perseus is always a good option. It's been designed in collaboration with the world #1, so Ben Johns himself. So they took everything they liked from the initial kind of Gen 1 Joola paddles, took on feedback from Ben Johns and amalgamated it into this paddle, which you see before me now, which is the Perseus. It is a Gen 2. As I mentioned, Gen 3s are out, but for the time being, in the recent PPA tour, he was still using this version or a modified version of the Perseus. It's been his go-to for many, many months, maybe even over a year now. The paddle market changes very quickly, but the Perseus has been a standout for Ben Johns. So you may be able to tell through the camera. So if I stand up the Perseus, if it stands, and then you've got the C2 here. The main difference in both these paddles is the shape. So with the Perseus, you've got a kind of more standardized paddle shape. It's really got a kind of squarer, boxy feel on the sweet spot, whereas the Hyperion has got the flared design based on the really successful Hyperion C1, which is the first edition of the Hyperion, launched back in around 22, 21. It was probably one of the most popular paddles that they ever created. So they took it, redesigned it, and created this Hyperion C2 shape. And then you've got the Ben Johns Perseus, which was their newer shape as of last year, which was based on what Ben Johns wanted from a paddle. So this one's got a kind of boxier sweet spot feel, whereas this one, the sweet spot extends higher. It's a bit narrower, it's more like an oval. So I find the sweet spot a bit easier to play with on this paddle than the boxier feel on this. But that's just me as a player alongside someone that talks about paddles. I am not an amazing player, just to put that out there before you go away and buy a paddle. But for me, I find this as a nicer feeling sweet spot. The Perseus sweet spot feels a bit smaller. So without further ado, let's dive into the paddle specs of this Ben Johns Perseus paddle and really dive under the surface to tell you about what are the features of it. Because on the surface, it looks like a carbon fibre paddle, and you would be absolutely correct in saying it's a carbon fibre paddle, but it's much more than that. So it features Joola's redesigned and reworked carbon friction surface. So some of you may remember their carbon friction surface through the Hyperion C1, the Radius, and the older Joola paddles. So they redesigned it with this new charged friction surface to create more power and more spin off the face. They also redesigned the graphics, which I think look incredible on these paddles. Joola do a really good job with their subtle but really nicely designed graphics, with the grey edge guard to match the grey handle. A little bit discoloured, this one, it's been used a lot, but these are very nice paddles, and you can kind of distinctly tell a Joola paddle from distance whenever people are using it. So the Ben John's Perseus comes in two different thicknesses. So you've got the 16mm like we've got in front of me here. The 16mm is more your kind of middle of the road paddle. As these paddles are thermoformed, meaning that it's the manufacturing process that's gone into the paddle. So the paddle has got essentially carbon fibre wrapped around the polypropylene to give it more power and to expand the sweet spot. So you, on paper, will find this paddle has more power anyway. But the 16mm provides you as a player with more control. You then have the 14mm, which is of course thinner. So if you're a player that demands more power, the 14mm may be the better option for you. If you're a player that wants a nice equal balance of both control and power, you do get a lot of through these paddles because of that charged friction surface and the thermoforming and the reactive honeycomb, which I'll talk about in a second. So you've got the 16mm and the 14mm. 16mm about control, 14mm more about the power. So as a player, the decision is yours. So let's have a look at some more of the specs of the Perseus. So the handle length is 5.5 inches with a grip circumference of 4.25 inches. So your standard kind of long-handled pickleball paddle or mid to long handle. If you're a player that likes two-handed backhands, a 5.5 inch grip is perfect for you, or 5.5 inch handle is perfect for you. And then it's got the 4.25, which is their standardized grip size for most players on the market. The paddle weighs in around about 8 ounces. Some you'll find at the 7.8 ounce kind of lighter end, and others you'll find at around 8.1, 8.2 ounces. But the average is 8 ounces, so it's a mid-weight paddle. So for those of you interested in a mid-weight, this could be a nice option for you. As I mentioned, it also features their charged friction surface. It's got a little charged friction logo in the corner up here as well. It's essentially a stiffer surface than what you would have found on the previous Joola versions. So the ball reacts differently every time it's striked off the paddle. It's got a stiffer feeling compared to the compression style feeling from the old Joola paddles, or the older generation Joola paddles, making it more of a power paddle. So for those of you that may have used the Gen 1 Joola paddles, so the likes of the Radius, the Hyperion C1, what differs in these kind of Generation 2? So the main thing is it's thermoformed. So instead of just the handle being thermoformed like it was on the old Hyperion, the entire body is a unibody design. So the entire paddle is one-piece construction, and you've got a carbon seam around the entire edge. And it is also foam injected around the sides to increase the size of the sweet spot. And Joola say it also helps with distribution of weight, so it feels nicer and it improves the swing weight of the paddle. This one's around 116, 117 swing weight. The 14 mils of around 112, 113, depending on what paddle you get. So both are on your kind of lighter end or your mid-range end for swing weight. So they both feel really nice at the net for those players of interested. It also features the reactive honeycomb polymer core, which is their new core designed for the Gen 2 paddles. You're going to get more power out of it, essentially. So that combined with a thermoforming unibody design, the foam injected edges, incremental gains is what Ben John says in this paddle, and incremental gains is exactly what he gets. In the pro game, every single second counts, and with the power this paddle was able to pack in when it was first launched, it's a really nice option for players out there. So one of my favourite bits, or one of my favourite pieces of this paddle is actually the handle. The handle feels really nice. I don't know if any of you watching remember the original Hyperion paddle, which had the kind of groove design on the handle. I wasn't too much of a fan of it because my hand would never sit right on the paddle. whereas this high tack performance grip feels lovely. The only downside of it is it's grey and it does get dirty, but as most players will on the market, inevitably throw on a overgrip just to add some tack to it. But the tack on this grip lasts a longer time than the originals, and it's really comfy. I find it's one of the more comfier grips on the market as well. So for those of you that look for the feel of a paddle, this is a nice one. So what sort of player does the Perseus suit? So the Perseus suits those that are looking for your kind of original slash more traditional style pickleball paddle. Maybe you've transitioned from table tennis like Ben Johns did, and actually you need more of a squarer sweet spot as opposed to the tennis-y style elongated face and flared head designs. The Perseus provides you with that. It also provides you with a great amount of power through the thermoforming unibody design and the extended sweet spot thanks to the foam injected edges with a nice weight all around. The paddle feels really nice to use. It's down to you to choose what one works better for you. If you have a question or any questions at all about either the Perseus or the Hyperion, either one of Ben Johns' paddles, please let us know. Drop us a message below. We're happy to help however we can. I've been Lloyd from the Pickleball store, and this is the Ben Johns paddle collection.